Oh, our car got rear-ended. Anyone know a good auto body shop?
I use Coventry Collision.
Coventry Collision? Okay.
Johnson Auto Body up in Tolland. Wayne Johnson's the president of the Connecticut Auto Body Association.
Johnson Auto Body. Okay.
They do exceptional work.
All right, it's 7:00 and I am calling the September 27th, 2021 meeting.
Recording in progress.
It's 7:00 and I am calling the September 27th, 2021 meeting of the Mansfield Town Council to order. Ms. Chang, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder.
Here.
Frattoni. Freudman.
Mr. Freudman's out ill today.
Kotchenberger. Moran.
Here.
Shurin.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you.
I'm sure Mr. Kotchenberger will be joining us shortly. The next item on our agenda is an opportunity for the public to address the council. Mr. Ellsworth, has anybody asked to address the council?
Madam Mayor, we have not received any requests to provide public comment that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Now your report, the report of the town manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to just start off by expressing my gratitude to all members of the council and department heads for that matter, although I've already thanked them in a staff meeting recently. But I want to thank you all for the honest and candid and thoughtful feedback you all provided during my initial evaluation process. It was a very comprehensive process, certainly robust in terms of number of participants, and everybody, naturally has a slightly different, sort of level of exposure or working relationship with me. And so it's really good to get those perspectives from all different corners. And while I'm very happy that the feedback was positive, manager that I can be for the town of Mansfield. And all the feedback that the folks provided. In furtherance of that, I will certainly, give every consideration I can to how I can tweak and modify what I'm doing to best serve this community. But it really is an honor and a privilege to serve Mansfield as its town manager, and look forward to working with everybody for years to come. Just a few things to highlight from my written report. The first session of the inaugural cohort of the Mansfield Local Government Academy, the MLGA as we're calling it, will debut on October 7th. There are 10 sessions, all touching on different topical areas like governance administration and public safety and public works. And so looking forward to that getting started in earnest. And we have 15 participants, which was our target number for the first cohort. We may grow it to 20 or more in future years, but with the pandemic and wanting to control numbers a little bit and make sure we can get everybody spaced out in the various rooms we'll be using, we were capping it at 15, and that seems like the magic number because I think that's the precise number of people that reached out. So I'm very excited about that and look forward to engaging with 15 residents in our community that are really, really interested in learning more about local government. As you all, I believe, are aware, or if you'd forgotten, you're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the last extension that you entered into for legal services with the town's attorney. And so you promised Kevin Deneen that you would be going back out to the market to do a competitive recruitment process. So staff are working on assembling an RFQ, request for qualifications, to test the market and see what's out there. And everybody went muted there for a second. Hopefully that just happened. The RFQ will be hitting the streets in just the next few days, and we'll give candidate law firms a few weeks to respond. So stay tuned to see who emerges. We had a very productive meeting. Hopefully the mayor will agree. We had a very productive meeting. I thought the initial kind of organizational meeting, I guess I'll call it, of this working group, this shared development framework working group that we've assembled with the University of Connecticut. This happened last Thursday. The conversation really focused on high level things. We didn't get too far in the weeds in terms of, policy procedure and sort of project level discussions, but I think the broader aims, the broad goals and objectives we each have, certainly we seem to be on the same page, and I'm very optimistic about what the future has in store. And along similar lines, the mayor and I we were invited to interview with folks from Connecticut Public Television, WNPR, later that same day. And so I think for our collective parts, we tried to make sure that we sent the message that we're very optimistic and very hopeful about what the future has in store for our relationship with UConn and our general excitement about working together on this development framework. So that's the Cliff Notes version. I think we're going to be meeting every couple of weeks. President Aguinobi himself participated, and I think he'll be pretty engaged in the process moving forward. So I think we're very excited about what the future has in store and appreciate his personal commitment that he's demonstrated to this process. I wanted to note that progress continues to be made on the MLK mural. In addition to some of the other items I've reported in the past, including the recruitment of a lead artist, happy to announce that there's going to be a couple community paint days. I believe one is happening at Mansfield Public Library on October 11th to coincide with Indigenous Peoples Day. So that's exciting, and we're pumping out more information to the community about how they can participate in those community paint days. To be candid and to be honest, we are a little bit slow on some of our private fundraising. There's a crowdsource fundraising page that is very easy to find on the town's website. If you go to the main page, mansfieldct.gov, So if you're interested in supporting the mural and contributing to help us raise the money for its production, there is a place where you can do that. And as a reminder, those dollars that are privately raised will be matched on a dollar for dollar basis with funding from Sustainable CT. So it's really important for us to pursue that and make sure we have the project budget needed to pull all this off. And the goal is to have the mural completed by November 1st. That's our current target. It's an ambitious date timeframe, but we're still moving forward with that goal in mind. The official kickoff of the municipal facilities quote unquote optimization study, the municipal basically needs assessment and programmatic use study, will be this Thursday, September 30th. Representatives from TSKP Studios are going to be coming to town for the beginning of what I'm sure will be a lot of visits to our facilities and meeting with senior staff and learning the ins and outs of how these spaces are currently being used to meet our mission. And so that process will largely span, or likely span, I should say, upwards of 9 months, although it'll be about 6 months before we receive a complete working draft of an initial report and recommendations and observations. So my feeling is that by March, we'll have a pretty good sense of where the study is going. This is, of course, an iterative process. It'll be back and forth, and it will take a few months to really finalize things. But prior to the start of the council's piece of the budget season, I think we're going to have some useful information to incorporate into those discussions from this study. Along a similar vein, in terms of potential new buildings, the new elementary school construction project continues to move forward at a fast pace. And I think that project at last reporting is roughly 10% complete. We're largely talking about foundations and underground utilities, but the contractor, I believe last week, estimated the overall completion at about 10%. So this is maybe the less glamorous stuff, the stuff that will be buried underground, but obviously it all starts with a good foundation. You need a good foundation. Just a few other things to note as a reminder to the public who's listening. Our Helping Hands program is available, and this is where we continue to accept applications for assistance with food and childcare needs from residents impacted by the pandemic. I strongly encourage people to go to our website to learn more and to apply. Also want to encourage people, if they haven't already and they're interested in ongoing development in town, to check out our development activity story map. Whether it's a large scale housing development or proposed commercial activity, our story map is a great place for people to find all sorts of useful information directly from the filings that the applicants have submitted for their various projects. So just a wealth of information there. This Saturday, and I'm really looking forward to attending this with my family, is the 18th annual Celebrate Mansfield Festival from 2 to 8 on Saturday in the downtown area, largely around the Betsy Patterson Square. I understand last year, because of the pandemic, it was sort of Celebrate Mansfield Month, and so it was done in sort of alternative format, I guess. So this will be a return to more of the traditional format with lots of vendors and entertainment and a kids zone. And so hope members of our community from far and wide will come and take part and celebrate Mansfield. And I look forward to meeting a lot of people I haven't had a chance to meet yet. Also on the topic of the downtown, the Mansfield Downtown Partnership, as the council is aware, previously engaged the services of a firm called Street Sense to guide and execute a strategic planning process with the partnership's board of directors and staff and other stakeholders. And on Thursday, October 7th, there will be a virtual presentation being made in terms of initial findings and their reporting on the quote research phase of the strategic planning process. So I think that'll have a lot of interesting information the members of the council will be interested in hearing. And I think, I guess I shouldn't end on a bit of bad news, but I guess that's the way it comes out. But we did receive unofficial word that the Mansfield Fire Department's grant application through FEMA's program known as the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, the SAFER grant. You'll recall we submitted an application to fund 4 new full-time firefighters basically one per shift. This is an incredibly competitive, grant program. It always is every cycle, every year. And this year was no different. And so it's our understanding that we did not receive favorable consideration, or at least our application has not been identified to move forward. And so we'll have an opportunity to debrief with FEMA, with our regional rep, and understand how we might be able to change that outcome in the future to the extent we're going to be reapplying. But that was a roughly $500,000. It would have offset $500,000 a year in personnel costs, because as you'll recall, it fully funds those positions for 3 years, everything basically but uniforms, all their salary and fringe benefits. So we'll go back to the drawing board and we will reevaluate moving forward. And that's all I guess I was going to pull up, and happy to answer any questions the council may have from my report.
Are there any questions of the town manager? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ellsworth. The next item on our agenda is reports and comments of town council members. I will echo Mr. Ellsworth's comments on the meeting we had with the university. I will say, however, that it's easy to talk generalities. It will get a little more difficult when we get down to specifics. And we must all remember that every institution, the town and the university, has its own goals and its own needs, and there will probably be conflict down the road. However, the effort to work collaboratively with the town is extraordinarily important, and the staff that is working with us is also very helpful, and people I'm glad to see at the table. So, any other council members have comments? My goodness, we're a quiet group tonight. Okay. The next item is the consent agenda. Mr. Shaken.
Good evening. Hi, Mayor. How are you? I'd like to move adoption of the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the consent agenda, please indicate by raising your hands. Is there any objection? Mr. Shaken, I didn't see your hand. Thank you. Okay. Passed unanimously. Old business is the COVID update. Mr. Aylesworth, I don't see Mr. Oh, there he is. Hey, Rob, welcome back once again. You didn't even get to go home today.
Well, actually, I did go home only to find out that my internet wasn't working. So here I am back at the office. That being said, thank you again for having me here tonight. I'll try to keep my update brief. Starting off with the data for the town of Mansfield, as of the week ending the 22nd, or some updated as of the 22nd, the town of Mansfield had 12 cases in the prior 14 days, which is relatively low. That compared to past periods, the DPH currently has the town of Mansfield below 5 cases per 100,000. So puts you below any of the alert framework levels stipulated by this Connecticut Department of Public Health. At the county level, for Tallinn, the CDC has lowered that risk level from high to substantial. So for both the town and the county, we appear to be trending in a reasonably good manner. This is to be reconciled with the district-wide data, which shows us essentially plateaued a bit. We're anywhere from 1 week to the next. Over the past 7 or 8 weeks, we've been We've been vacillating between 50 and 70 cases per week for the entire district. But I am heartened to hear and to see the data from both the town and the county level. That's good news. Let's hope that pattern continues as the weather gets colder and more people go indoors. In terms of vaccination coverage rates, the total health district population is approximately 71% having received its first dose, and 68% for those who are fully vaccinated. This is compared to state totals of 69 and 64% respectively, again, as of September 22nd. The health district has taken the liberty of combining data provided by the University of Connecticut on their vaccination rate for residential students with the town of Mansfield population. And based on those two combined data sets, we estimate the town of Mansfield coverage for those who have received first doses at 79%. And those who are fully vaccinated at 76%, again, as of September 22nd. And comparing those to the state totals of 69 and 64% respectively, again, Mansfield, at least relative to the state, appears to be doing relatively well on that front. Of course, there's still quite a few people unvaccinated, and so there continues to be an ongoing effort to address that issue. Recently, as everybody is aware, the White House, the CDC, and our governor have announced availability of booster shots. Individuals who are eligible for boosters are those 65 and older. Individuals 18 to 64 with underlying medical conditions, and those 18 to 64 who participate are engaged in occupational settings which may put them at risk. Despite the fact that the state website's not quite updated on some of these details, there are providers out there in the area that are making boosters available to eligible individuals. I'm aware that CVS has appointments, and so too does Hartford Healthcare. The health district, for our part, we're still waiting for updates on our clinical standing orders that are provided typically by the manufacturer. At some point in time down the road, the health district will be making appointments available for booster shots for eligible individuals. We continue to, yes.
Before you move off that, the health district administered Moderna vaccines for the most part.
Right. Correct. So
the CDC recommendations are for Pfizer, not for Moderna. What about us?
No, correct. So Moderna is still appears to be a few weeks off, as is Johnson & Johnson. My understanding is that the data has been submitted to the CDC, but I'm unsure as to whether or not the FDA and the CDC Advisory Committee have actually set a date to discuss that data and make their recommendations. So more to come on that. The health district, however, has started to order and does now have Pfizer in our inventory. And so in part in preparation for the rollout for kids between 5 and 11, we're hoping sometime beginning in November. But in the interim, once we get our situation here at the health district updated, we'll be able to provide some boosters on a limited basis to those who received the Pfizer vaccine. Thank you, Madam Mayor. We continue to be fully engaged with contact tracing. We're still tracing all the cases that are counted in our district on a weekly basis. The schools, with the opening of the school year, we've been extremely busy supporting our schools in their efforts to to keep the school setting safe. There are a number of cases among the school population, and along with that, close contacts, which we're working to identify. We've discovered through our contact tracing a pattern, or we've observed a pattern. Many of the cases tend to be younger, as you might expect, since that is the age group which is mostly unvaccinated, and so we're seeing some transmission or cases among youth athletic teams, and then we're also, as we've seen very much in the past, a pattern associated with families. An individual comes into the family who's infectious, and then many other family members are exposed and become infectious as a result of that. So that appears to be a couple of primary pattern points that we're seeing with contact tracing in communities. I'm also aware that testing has been an issue on the fore, particularly with respect to the recent vaccine mandate and the alternative offered to those affected workers for which the vaccine mandate applies. Many of those affected workers are provided a weekly test option. We've been getting inquiries from schools and bus companies and other employers about the availability of testing. The health district's been working hard to keep our website updated on test sites within our area and our district, so that individuals have available the most updated information on where they can get a test. We did have an unfortunate timing with the Generations this past week. For some reason, they decided to close down the week before the mandated testing deadline or vaccination deadline for many affected worker. So there was a bit of a scramble. I was able to determine that they are open back up, but disappointingly, it's disappointing to hear that they are limiting their test schedule to just patients. I just learned that today. So we'll continue to try to get information out there to the public and to others on where testing is available. And with that, I'll open it up and be glad to answer any questions that members may have.
Ben?
Hi, thanks, Rob. And sorry?
Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Katzenberger.
Thanks. Thanks for the update, Rob. I have a few sort of comments. First, just things to put on our agenda into the future. We have this sort of standing emergency mask mandate, which we put into place when we were nearing the high COVID incidence level in town around the return of UConn. So just to keep that in the back of our minds as a council as to when if and when COVID drops further, when it's a good time to reconsider that mandate, hopefully maybe timed around the widespread prevalence of booster shots. Just a quick note on that. I know Rob mentioned it's been a little bit of a challenge on the state's website side. I'm not eligible yet, but I just logged into Hartford Healthcare where I got my vaccine, and they're all set up and ready to go for booster shot appointments for folks who are eligible, which is anyone who's over 65 and got the vaccine before March or before the beginning of April, or anyone who's under 65 who's got a series of underlying medical conditions, or anyone who works in a particularly risky place for COVID transmission, regardless of age or medical status. So I'll be eligible in a month because I got my vaccine in April. But for those of you who got it earlier from Pfizer, just know that check the provider you got it from, and for folks who got Hartford Healthcare, it's already up and running. The other thing, just that I may have been on the personnel committee's agenda tonight, so we may be getting to it, but just to state sort of publicly and Terry, you can stop me if you're going to get to this later. I think it's time to start talking about a vaccine mandate for town staff to coincide with what we're asking of our school district employees and contractors, what the state is requiring of them, I should say, and what the state's requiring of their employees beginning today. And then finally, Rob, you know my frustrations on the testing issue. I am also want to say publicly, I am incredibly disappointed with Generation's decision to significantly restrict the testing options available to the Wyndham community and by extension the Mansfield community. I don't know what the status is of the state's contract with community health centers and federally qualified health centers to provide no-cost testing to the population. I don't know if that contract has run up. My impression is it has not, but their decision to limit testing to folks who have been tested at Generations in the past or are otherwise patients there already and not be open to members of the general public at all is a significant issue, and it's one that we really need to remedy for Mansfield. I know it's a lot of people. I know many people have been tested by Generations in the past and will fall under their new definition, but it's still a significant concern for me. And so I know you're working on it, Rob, because I've sent annoyed emails about it to everybody, but I just want to state publicly that it's an issue that I hope can get resolved. As it stands right now, there's only public testing available to within 10 miles of Mansfield in Wyndham on the 2 days a week that the semaphore testing site is open at the rec park at 50 Main Street. Sorry, 3 days a week, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. They're only open until 2 p.m. And apparently it floods when it rains. And so they close when it's flooded. So it's a significant problem. I was trying to be extra careful, having attended a wedding that we were a little too close together for my comfort before seeing elderly or older parents last weekend. And I spent half a day between 2 days driving around trying to find a test. Went to multiple sites in Willimantic that were closed unexpectedly, and then couldn't find a take-home test to buy at any pharmacy in Connecticut. So my frustration aside, I'm especially concerned for people who can't get to Rec Park on one of these 3 days between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. and the need for folks to be able to get tested without having to have enough time or means to get to Norwich or Vernon or Hartford. And so I've been sending angry notes to DPH, but I hope that we can work as a town to get this resolved to get more availability for Mansfield residents.
Thank you, Ben, for those comments. And yes, we have been communicating with both local partners and the state DPH on this matter. So more to come.
One thing before we move on, everybody's talking about boosters generically. They are not available for people who have taken the Moderna vaccine. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just to clarify, Madam Mayor, right now boosters are only available for those who received Pfizer as their first set of COVID-19 vaccines. Moderna and J&J have yet to be the emergency use authorization has yet to be extended for boosters for those two vaccines. Right now, it's only Pfizer.
I think it's important because in this area, the vast majority of people got Moderna vaccines. And I did read that the Moderna vaccine had a larger dose in beginning, and so it seems to be more protective than the Pfizer. Is that correct, Mr. Miller?
I did read that also, Madam Mayor. So your information is consistent with mine. And so while the data has been submitted and at some point the FDA and CDC will review it and make recommendations, there's still it's impossible really to speculate on what those recommendations might be.
Right. I think probably the most important thing to watch for is the recommendation, because they're the largest of our population.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't catch that last bit.
I said the most important news to watch for is the release of vaccines for children, because that is the last remaining unvaccinated part of our population.
Yeah, that's correct. Getting the children in our communities vaccinated, those between 5 and 11, will significantly increase the vaccine coverage amongst our population and make a important step towards a much larger percentage of the population protected.
Thank you. Mr. Katzenberger?
Thank you. And thank you, Rob, for the update. In terms of vaccine hesitancy, I realize, of course, this is a national issue in both in Connecticut and probably in Mansfield. We have a much higher rate than the rest of the country, much of the country. But is there more in your mind? Are there new ideas or more we can do within Eastern Highlands, Mansfield, to get people who are still hesitating about the vaccine to encourage them to get it? And do you need anything from us from that? Or is there additional resources, money that would be helpful in terms of getting more people vaccinated?
Well, I appreciate the offer, Councilman Katzenberger. I would say that is there more that can be done? Sure. I think that we're certainly doing our part to get messaging out. Certainly, the town could support that, and to a certain degree, that town has done an excellent job in supporting our efforts to get the messaging out. I think it's important to make sure that the health district is aware of any kind of mass gathering event. I'm not sure if exactly that's the best phrase to use under today's current conditions, but an event that which there'll be a lot of foot traffic, so we can take opportunity of that and do a pop-up clinic to get people vaccinated. Obviously, our experience has been that if it's really easy and convenient, then those who may be hesitant or just maybe apathetic, for lack of a better term, if it's convenient, then they're more likely to get it. In terms, I think though we're coming up against a kind of a hardcore anti-vax segment of the population. I'm not sure if we'll ever really be able to turn those minds for whatever reason. I think we've talked about one point here today already, and that's regarding vaccine mandates.
Right.
My position, our position here at the health district is employers, I think, have an important role to play in improving vaccine coverage among the population. And we're seeing the effects of that within our own walk-in clinic here in the town hall. We've seen a clear uptick in vaccine demand that's related to the governor's vaccine mandate. And so that's good from a public health perspective.
Thank you. So you probably already have this on the agenda, but I think this Saturday is celebrate this weekend.
Yes, thank you for noting that. We will be there. We will be hosting a pop-up vaccination clinic. We'll be offering a menu of vaccines. Not only will we have Pfizer and J&J available on the COVID-19 side, we'll also be offering kids and adult flu shots too, for those who wish to get their influenza shot for the season.
Thank you. That's great.
Have you thought about going to the flea market at the drive-in movie?
We have. So yes, there's been a number of pop-up clinics at the flea market, mostly over this past summer, early summer. In fact, we hosted one clinic, and then the DPH Griffin vans hosted a couple more clinics. So we have been targeting that group.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Miller? Thank you once again, and let's hope everybody stays well and gets their shots. Mr. Strasburger.
Ben, just as an FYI, there is a testing station at the Coventry CVS that does both the rapid test and the other test. And they've been doing them up just about every day during the week for the past several weeks. Just an FYI.
Thank you. Any further comments on COVID? All right, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is new business. It is the naming of the new elementary school. And this one is a really exciting prospect. We have with us Kathy Ward, who is the head of the Board of Education, and Mr. Aylesworth. All three of us serve on the school building committee. The school building committee has been asked to come up with a name, preferably before the end of September, which is fast approaching, because there are construction details around building signs and a portico and so on. And so the Board of Education has made a recommendation. Ms. Ward, would you care to comment or explain?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me? I'm having internet issues. We were taken aback a little, I have to admit. First of all, that the board was going to have to make a recommendation. We were thinking that this was a town building and that the town would be looking at this rather in depth. And I know it's a procurement issue, trying to get the lettering for the outside of the building. That's why we have to do it this quickly. But it really didn't give us an awful lot of time to think about this. So I did let my board members know that we had about 2 weeks before our next meeting and that we had to make a recommendation to you about the naming of the school. And the majority of our board felt that Mansfield Elementary School was the appropriate name. It kind of brought us all together as opposed to having, separate schools. We're all in this one thing together, similar to the middle school. We thought Mansfield Elementary School is the appropriate thing to do. I have to say we didn't have a lot of time to pursue anything else. We did have 2 board members who did not agree with naming it Mansfield Elementary School. The board members did know 2 weeks prior to our meeting that if they had any other suggestions, they were welcome to bring it, but there was nothing else. So Mansfield Elementary School was our recommendation.
I understand that there's going to be some consideration of preserving the legacies of the 3 existing schools. I mean, both Vinton and Goodwin were named for very important women in Mansfield history, both of them who made very lifetime contributions to education. Annie Vinton was a teacher and a librarian for many, many years, greatly beloved, and Dorothy Goodwin, among other things, of course, was part of the original, led the original legislation that tried to equalize state spending for schools. She was chair of the education department while they were creating that formula and directing that money. Interestingly enough, she rewrote the formula so that Mansfield wouldn't get all of the money we thought we were entitled to because she didn't think we were really entitled to that much. We didn't have the kind of poverty that Hartford and New Haven had. But her successor fixed that. So we now have a full accounting of our ECS money. In any case, both of them were beloved women. We would not want to lose their legacies. But nobody's been able to come up with an equivalent that would unify the school. It's really hard to come up with an equivalent. So,
and it's very difficult to do that, Mayor, with the limited time that we have.
yes.
Perhaps if a committee by the town council was formed and we had some time to look at. One mention, as you know, from the school building committee was the geography of the area. So not only the history, but the geography. Is there something there that we could build on? But I think with this tight time frame, I mean, basically, you had a month, we had 2 weeks without prior notice. So I think it was a difficult task. Unless we can amend that somehow at this point in time.
Well, at one point I asked the building committee to make sure that the construction of the school wasn't, of the part that has the name on it wasn't part of the fundamental building, so that at some point it might be changed if people wanted to change it. And you know, they're talking about a big sign out front, and also some letters on the portico. So I don't think this is going to be permanent for the ages, but it certainly would be what the school, how the school would open, and probably stay for quite some time until something else arose that everybody agreed with.
I just think it's unfortunate that it is what it is, because it's a procurement issue that we need to get this done. But I'm not exactly sure we've looked at this as thoroughly as we could have. Not just the town council, but the Board of Ed as well.
Mr. Katzenberger.
Yeah, no, I think we ought to take Kathy's point on that. We understand we need a name for the procurement, and we have one. If, for example, over the last over the next 5 months or so, or 6 months, whatever time frame, the town council working with the Board of Ed come up with a different name, I assume we could substitute that in before the sign goes up. I mean, I don't know that, I mean, I guess I should ask that as a question. I can't imagine the state would, take offense at us changing the name of our own school midway through the project. Because I think with 4 or 5 months, we might be able to come up with a name that is more descriptive of the accomplishments of various people.
Well, I think that's possible. It will add to the cost, of course. Whatever you do will add, any kind of change order will add to the cost. And whether or not the state will support that kind of a cost, I don't know.
Although, if we keep it, I mean, again, I haven't seen how we have to do it, but if we keep it, I mean, if Mansfield School is, more or less a placeholder for a different term, and we don't even, we know where we want the name of the school to be, but we haven't formally, we still want to have some flexibility. I don't know if that would be a problem. I mean, we have time before the school, obviously, is where that decision point has to be made. And if I would suggest use it.
No, the builders are telling us they need to build the school, the signs now. They need to order the materials to build the signs now. And by the way, nobody's suggested changing Mansfield Middle School either. So this does really follow a pattern.
Yes, although it'd be good, I think, you may have just answered the question, but it would be good to make it a deliberate, a decision based on, sufficient reflection and thought, rather than because we're all sort of pushed at the last minute. I think we could do both, but, I've made, my thought on that.
Well, that's a long-term proposition.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking it could be a short term if we did it over the next 5 months, but if I don't know the schedule the builders need. I viewed it as not a major change, but I'm not a builder.
Yeah, well, this is what the builders are telling us.
I think part of the issue is that their material, sorry, I was just gonna say for Peter's benefit, we're hearing just, it almost doesn't matter what you're talking about. There's material shortages, like across the board. And I completely understand. It's almost hard, like a cognitive level, to say, wait a second, we really need to commit to lettering on a sign right now to, at this stage. But, the industry experts and our project manager, everybody seems to agree that, yeah, unfortunately, so maybe there should have been more advanced warning, like back when, that we're going to ask you for this and be ready. So there definitely could have been that, and that did not happen. That's, I think everybody shared frustration, but we have to go based on what we're being told that, you know, in order to have the sign up in time and have the materials procured to do this in time for when the school opens, they're under the gun.
And Mayor, if I may ask, who makes the final decision about this? I know we were asked for a recommendation, but.
Well, this is the reason that I asked you, the board, for a recommendation was that the school is a body of people. The building, the town owns, but they go by the same name. And it seemed to me that a recommendation from the school board about what they wanted their institution named would make some sense before we actually named the building. I mean, we could name the building the Ryan Aylesworth Memorial Building, you know, but that wouldn't say anything about the school. The Mansfield Elementary School, as generic as it is, does say something about the school.
And it talks about, I think Ryan's mentioned this, about that we've consolidated our 3 schools. When we had our 3 schools separate, we needed to have separate names, but now we want to kind of get rid of that divisiveness and bring it all together. And I think that happens when you say Mansfield Elementary School. I know Ryan had mentioned once perhaps Mansfield Consolidated Elementary School, but down the road in 10 years, no one's going to stand that consolidation because it's not going to be an issue any longer. So I'm comfortable with it. The majority of my board was comfortable with it, but I do admit that we didn't have the time to be more deliberate about thinking of other options. But as of right now, if we're under the gun, this is what the majority of our board recommends.
We have a motion for this on page 17, I believe. Would somebody like to make that motion? Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor.
You've been working in the courts too long.
Yes, it's been a long day. I move effective September 27th, 2021 to name the new elementary school Mansfield Elementary School.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Bruder?
Nothing other than to thank the hard work by Kathy Ward and all the other board members for, you know, the efforts that they put into this for the new school, and all the other school building committee members. And that, you know, I know that this may be, as we said, something that other people would like to have seen a different name, but I think this is a good choice.
Are there any other comments? Is there anybody who's going to abstain from this vote? Is there anybody who's going to vote in the negative? Then the motion's been adopted unanimously. Mansfield Elementary School it is. Thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda. Regional Youth Diversion Program Agreements. Mr. Aylesworth, would you like to introduce staff, or do you want to talk to this?
I will very quickly introduce it and then hand over to staff. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My understanding is going back to February of 2020, so about a year and a half ago. The town council went on the record basically as strongly encouraging our Youth Services Bureau to work in the direction of establishing a youth diversion program, and the concept, I think, from the get-go has been a regional one, mirroring the political boundaries or the catchment area, if you will, of the 3 towns that comprise our regional high school, Region 19 school district. And so that would be the towns of Mansfield, Willington, and Ashford. And As the agenda item summary you all read kind of reminds everybody, things were kind of put on hiatus for a while because of COVID, and it was foreseen as a difficult time to launch a youth diversion program, otherwise sometimes referred to as a juvenile review board, during a pandemic when people are doing things remotely by and large. But the circumstances are now allowing us to revisit this, and we have been revisiting this, and I want to turn it over to Pat Schneider, the Director of Human Services, and Katie Bell, the Youth Services Supervisor, to provide everybody an update on where things stand in terms of our communications with the other towns that would comprise this, and the general level of support for this, and where we're proposing to go from here. So Pat or Katie, whoever's talking first.
Pat, you're muted.
I'll just talk briefly, as Katie's been really the lead person on this project, that this has been something that the town has discussed for quite some time now, and had looked at different models. The Youth Service Advisory Council, has kind of worked through this as well, at the different options for a diversion program. Mostly court diversion was what we were looking at. But there's also been some evolution of this that's happened at a statewide over the last several years. That's, and some changes in our legal system that has really put this on a little bit more of a fast track in just about every community. So, we're here to answer any questions. But again, I think Katie would be the best person to really tell you from a status report where we are in our conversations with the other towns, and what we're looking for as this evolves.
Thank you all so much for having us tonight. I'm very excited to come back to this group and report on the progress that we've made since you charged us back in February, and in much simpler times, to work towards building a restorative justice-based diversion program for the youth of Mansfield, and how to do that as efficiently as possible in a regional school district. So we have been able to be in really great conversations with the Region 19 Board of Education. I want to name it correctly, their Equity, Diversity, and Justice Board of Region 19, as well as our Youth Services Advisory Board, as well as our new Mansfield resident State Trooper Sergeant, Sergeant King, who's recently come on, our new town manager, who is new to this process as well. So we've had a lot of new people coming to the table who are very interested and very supporting in doing this. And we've also been able to work with my counterparts at Willington and Ashford, Melissa McDonough and Jenny Arpin, to present the proposal of the creation of a regional juvenile justice diversion program to their respective boards of selectmen. And so we're very excited that as of this past September, those boards of selectmen have approved their youth service bureaus to allocate time, energy, resources towards a regional serving diversion program. And it's actually really exciting, because I keep wanting to say juvenile review board, but we're actually in the process statewide in looking at other nomenclature to really emphasize that it is restorative justice based, and to take it away from kind of the old sense of it's a mini courtroom or a mock courtroom, because it's really not. And it's really based around the neurology of our youth and how to help them learn to make better choices and repair harms in the community. So we, at this point, have a lot of very excited stakeholders at the table to make this happen in a regional capacity. Right now, we don't have additional funding for it, but in the Youth Service Bureau grants that we write every year, we have allocated some of that spending towards starting up a diversion program, and whatever name that might take on, to really emphasize the regionality as well as the restorative justice aspect of it. And so we will have, some funding set aside from the grants that we already received that have been earmarked for some of the startup costs. And there is funding available for other diversion programs, specifically those that are sponsored through the Youth Service Bureaus as part of the Connecticut Youth Services Association, for those boards that have been up and running for periods of 6 months or more. So that, those boards have been established. They've shown good faith efforts to be bringing in those referrals, taking them out of the court systems, and bringing them back in the community in the community hub model that Youth Service Bureaus are really already tasked at doing in a lot of different ways. So there's potential funding available to us in the next grant cycle if we're able to move forward with I wouldn't even call it haste. I would say if we continue to move forward at the pace that we're working at with all of the folks who are at the table in support of this, because I think we've got really solid backing, and the communities are excited about the equity that this can bring to our community as well, and the importance of that in serving all of our youth. So we would, as long as we were kind of up and running by January, we would be eligible to apply for additional funds in the next grant building cycle. And that would be through the Connecticut Youth Services Association, working very closely with our juvenile justice liaison, Erica Bromley, who, is been amazing support in the creation process and kind of walking us through what other towns have done from a regional model to make it work. So as part of the attachments to the packet tonight, we do have 2 different examples of MOUs and MOAs that some other towns in Connecticut have used to establish regional model juvenile justice diversion programs. So there's one that Erica had shared with us, and there's another one that actually Attorney Deneen had shared with us. So there are a lot of youth service bureaus out there who are using regional models to serve communities efficiently. And the model of diversion has really been around in Connecticut for about 50 years now. So it has been around a long time. There's not a specific mandate or statute for it, but we do know that more and more we're seeing language come out in changes in legislation that specifically identifies the youth service bureaus as the referral points in the community hub. So even in the past, 3 years, we've seen truancy referrals come out of the court system and go to the youth service bureaus as the mandated referral hub to create support networks, to improve attendance rather than punish people for not going to school. We've similarly seen what are called status offenses that were under family with service needs referrals, FWISNs. They might be kind of the phrase that you might be familiar with. So those would be for youth who have run away from home, youth that are considered beyond control of the parents, or again, truancy was considered a FWISN referral or defiance of school rules that was above and beyond what a school's kind of code of conduct could respond to. So all of those referrals that used to go through courts are now by state mandate coming to youth service bureaus anyway. So having a mechanism to respond to those referrals is a great opportunity for us to seize upon and create meaningful change for youth and families in our community.
Any questions for Ms. Bell or Ms. Schneider? Mr. Bruder.
Just wanted to thank you both for all the work you've done on this. I know Councilor Berthlett's been really on top of making sure that this has been an agenda item, so I'm very excited that this is here today. And just a quick question, in some of the discussions that at least I had been involved in, we were talking about the Youth Services Bureau or being provided by Mansfield and then being contracted out, divisionally with each town. It seems like this is different in that sense where Mansfield will handle Mansfield kids and Wellington will handle Wellington and Ashford will handle Ashford. Is that the direction it's going now?
Can I speak to this just a little bit? So we would probably be the hub as we're the biggest community, but it would allow kids who had from the different towns who had done some type of behavior or offense together, because they'll only see kids or allow kids to go through the system if every child that was part of the behavior can go through. So we would probably be the kind of the lead town, but the case management of each of the youth who were involved in the incidents would go back to the individual towns. So it could be dealt with in their community.
It's exciting. Thank you very much for that explanation.
And we're hopeful that in that partnership with the youth service bureaus that we anticipate that our membership on the board itself, who are going to be supporting the kids in those cases, are going to be point people in their community. And so organizing that in a regional way is going to be a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we're up for, of making sure that, you know, if a kiddo from, the middle school over in Ashford is getting in trouble, that a part of their school network is available to support them in that, so that they can be the link, not just at the diversion review, but then also back at the school. And, you know, it wouldn't make sense for it to be the Mansfield middle school person because that connection isn't there. So we're kind of anticipating having a larger scope of members on the board, but still trying to keep it to a not overwhelming amount of people at the table on any given day, and to make sure it's the right mix of people in the room who are going to be able to follow the kiddo in whatever community they're coming from, to be that meaningful support network for them.
I like that a lot. Thank you. I like that the community is involved, and I'm just glad it's getting done. Thank you.
Mr. Katzenberger, followed by Mr. Shuren.
Thank you. This is, of course, a great idea, and I very much, I suspect you're right, and I very much hope you're right, that the number of formerly, things considered offenses now will be more and more, deferred when appropriate. That is that would be good from so many perspectives. I guess I have two questions. I'll just ask both of them. One is, I think your memo says that you have some existing funds for this year, but do you have the resources? I'm not trying to give away the story, but I do have the resources you need, for this year to make a good application for next year. That's one question. The second is, I don't know if you want to, I have a sense what it is, and I think we've talked about it at a previous council meeting, but if you wanted to just briefly describe the concept of restorative justice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great questions. Thank you. So for this year, we are really anticipating that startup cost and number of referrals tend to be low. We've kind of really done a lot of talking with Erica Bromley, who's kind of our point person with CYSA, to kind of get a sense of what that first 6 months of any juvenile justice diversion program might look like. And it is getting the word out there, getting the referral connections out there. And so you don't necessarily get a ton of referrals all at once, but you start to build that capacity, you start to build that connection, so that your referrals start to build. I think for the first 6 months of setting up a diversion program, that we should be in good shape, and it'll give us a good sense on what we will want to ask for when we're eligible for those funds. And the way those funds do work is typically there's not new funding that's available. So anytime a new diversion program in Connecticut opens, it's more diversion programs kind of asking for the same pot of money, but it is kind of based around what the need is. It's not based on any specific population or number. It's, what is the ask? What are you seeing as the need in your community? And kind of having that justification from the first 6 months of here's what we, needed to expend in the first 6 months. So here's our extrapolation of what we think we'll need to do for the next year, anticipating that the number of referrals will grow. So I think for what we've budgeted for out of our grants funding, out of the Youth Service Bureau Enhancement Grant, which is a recurring grant with us and kind of adjacent to a lot of the diversion work that we'll be doing, we should have enough from our end to kind of take care of anything that might come up. A lot of the expenses that we anticipate would be potentially supporting positive youth development programs for kids who have been referred to enroll in, to kind of give them a positive outlook and outlet to be busy, stay out of trouble, and knowing that for some families that might be financially out of reach. So being able to help support families in accessing those things, to make sure that, a family's finances aren't a barrier for a child working on some diversion work to improve their connection to the community, improve what they need. Other things we might have to consider is looking at supporting co-pays for referrals for behavioral or mental health treatment if they're not kiddos that might be seen through us specifically. So if there's a higher need, if there's some specific substance use that might be going on, there's programs that are great for that are going to be more targeted, more supportive, and a better fit for those kiddos, and also kind of the recognition that we have other duties through our youth services where we're supporting, K through 8 with the school social work supports and the other programs. So we recognize that we cannot be everything to everybody, but we can be a great referral source. And if the need arises, we can help families access those referrals. So I think financially we should be okay to move forward with the project for that first 6 months and then have a really good sense on what to ask for future funding. And then to kind of talk a little bit more about restorative justice. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I'm very excited that it is the model that is receiving so much support within the state of Connecticut through the Youth Services Bureau, the Connecticut Youth Services Association. They've been amazing in constantly putting out trainings for other juvenile review boards that are out there to teach about what this is. So they will continue to be a resource to train our staff and our board members in restorative justice, and really the difference in restorative justice versus the punitive justice system that's really kind of associated with the courts. It is the goal to not punish for a wrong, but to help understand the harm that was done based on the offense. And by kind of developing that understanding, especially with kids, you're developing empathy and you're giving them an opportunity to make amends for the wrong that they did and the harm that they did to the community. And by making that amends, they're reconnecting into the community as opposed to being separated from the community, like we would see in an incarceration model. And we know that when they're doing those things to reconnect to the community, to repair a harm that they've done, more fully understand the extent of the harm that they've done and do almost an overcorrection for it, it has much more meaningful outcomes than being on probation for 90 days and kind of hoping that they learn a lesson, when really what the research has kind of shown is that oftentimes when kids connect early on into the court systems and go through the probation process, that the probation process doesn't necessarily have a lot of teeth to it. And so what is actually learned is kind of that there's not a lot of accountability for an action when it goes through a court system. And so those kids are more likely to end up connected to the adult justice system later on. So by diverting them from the juvenile justice system and keeping them from touching that court, we actually keep a lot of kids out of the adult justice system because they have much more hands-on learning and understanding and shifts in how they think about how they engage with their world and connection to supports that can really help them make better choices for themselves and kind of come up with different goals for themselves and understand what meaningful outcomes they can have by working with their support network and understanding that other people have their back and want them to be successful, and that it's not an us versus you're in big trouble. It's we're all together in this to improve the life of everyone in our community. And you, even though you've hurt our community, are still a part of our community. And we want you to be successful too.
That's great. Thank you.
And I can also say, having in my previous job for almost 20 years dealt with a diversion program, have seen how kids have turned around, how the parents have received help, when they're feeling like their child is out of control, and how kids who've been fringe kids or isolated kids have connected with the community. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And, to see kids develop resiliency factors and understand the impact of what their behavior is, on the community and on others. So there's a lot of good research about how this model works versus a punitive model. I can also say from a budgetary point of view, I know I've already talked to the group several times about the fact that we do not do this. We don't provide social work services to high school students. And, I'll be honest with you, the majority of the people who tend to come through this program are high school students. And that is something that the town will probably need to address and will become much more apparent as we get more into this process. Like Katie says, we have the resources now to make a start, but it is something down the line that the town will have to take a look at. The need for social work services for high school students who are Mansfield residents that issues are not necessarily school related issues, that parents and kids need the support in the community.
I know you've raised this issue to us before, Ms. Schneider. Mr. Shuren.
Yeah, this is a very positive development for many reasons. Just want to ask a couple of questions because I'm not sure I fully understand how it works. It is a more informal, essentially, process than the juvenile justice system. But are the protections that that system provides in terms of things like confidentiality also applicable here?
That's a great question. And there's actually a lot of standardized procedures and protocols that they're all listed on the Connecticut Youth Services Association website. And I don't want to get them wrong, so I'm not going to try to quote them. But the confidentiality is definitely a major consideration. So one of the things that actually is very different from doing a restorative justice diversion program compared to appearing in court is that to appear in a diversion program, you admit the wrongdoing, you admit the harm, and that's the first step. You're not trying to prove your innocence, you're accepting responsibility for the actions that you've taken. So we kind of work with the child and their family unit and develop those sets of diversions that's going to help support them. And then when they've completed those, and that's all confidential. That's all in the work that they do with their case manager, and the board itself holds all of those things confidential. And then after a set period of time, as long as that youth doesn't reappear before the board for similar issues in the community, those files are destroyed in the same way that clinical documents would be kept confidential, but even higher because there are legal repercussions involved. So if someone were to be able to successfully complete a diversion program and, within however many months, whether it's 6 months or a year, I don't remember exactly, didn't have any more contact with, police or other offenses, those documents and things would all be shredded and subject to destruction and never a part of their record. So going to a JRB or a diversion program would keep any arrests from ever appearing on that youth's record.
So if the student or youth denies the offense, are they eligible to go through this or?
No. If the youth or the parent say we're going to go through our legal rights to due process to prove innocence, then they would go through the court system to prove innocence and go through the court contact system, and that's completely still within their rights. And if that's the best fit for them, we encourage them to do that. But for families who don't want to go through that process, and for youth and families who are willing to say, yep, this happened and we don't want it to happen again, how can we support our child to do better? That's what the diversion programs are for.
One of the other concerns that I've heard people say is, what about repeat offenders? This is not a system that handles repeat offenders. So it's really trying to catch at an early point when offenses aren't at that serious level to engage with the child and their parents to try to. It's a prevention model as well. So we wouldn't be handling ongoing repeat offenders. It's not set up for that.
This is part of a movement that's been going on for 20 or 30 years around restorative justice. There was a Judge Norco who lived right around here who sort of introduced it with the first restorative justice program in Hartford. God, it must have been in the 80s that Judge Norco started this. But part of the philosophy is that the kid makes amends. Tries to fix what was broken, tries to, if he dumped over garbage cans, then he has to clean up garbage. If he stole something, he has to replace it. And interestingly enough, it's actually based on a philosophy of Native American justice, where the person who violates the harmony of the community has to restore the harmony of the community. And it actually, there's a lot in it that runs counter to the Anglo-American sense of justice, because restoring the community is what comes first, rather than the protecting the rights of the individual. although it works for the individual in the long run. It's a really interesting system. I think everybody here has agreed that it's time for our motion. We obviously do not have a system in place yet. This motion would give us the process to move forward. Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you, Mayor. I move effective September the 27th, 2021 to authorize the town manager and/or his designees to begin developing a memorandum of agreement with the towns of Wellington and Ashford relative to the creation of a regional juvenile justice diversion program.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Bruder. Ms. Berthelot, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Begin by thanking Ms. Schneider and Ms. Bell for your hard work and attention to this matter. It's so important for our future because our kids are our future. These are important children and young adults, and we really want to do everything we can to keep them as whole as possible. And nothing, well, many things can harm children, but a thing that definitely harms them is being incarcerated in the criminal justice system. They go in as teenagers and come out permanently broken. So we want to avoid that. And the other thing that's wonderful about this program, I heard the mayor talk about the Native American ideals and programs, but also it harkens back to Catholicism, this concept of reconciliation. In Catholicism, one does penance to be reconciled with God entirely. It's not an issue of forgiveness. You're whole again. And this is very much about being whole again, about being part of the community. The community is made whole, and if people do something to make amends, in the sense of a penance, and then it's not that the town forgives them. They are again whole with the town. We are all again community. So it's a wonderful concept, and I hope that we can bring it to fruition. I believe it. I see that in your eyes. I see it in passion behind this. And I thank you so much for this.
Mr. Osberger?
Yes, I just have some comments on this. First, I'd like to preface this by saying, the work that the Mansfield Youth Services and how it has affected myself, my family, and such through the years, I cannot, there's not enough time this evening to go through with it all. They've done a wonderful job through the years, and I think this is a wonderful program. The two districts that these programs have in place, though, I would like to bring in representatives to discuss / maybe hear from these local programs to see how theirs are working. The examples that we're given, although, they're wonderful examples, Westport, Norwalk, Danbury, Brookfield, I don't think they really represent our area of the state in either population, character, or demography. And so I would like to amend this motion. Can I go forward with the amendment, or?
You want to make an amendment to the motion, so move to amend the motion.
So I move to table the motion pending a presentation by the Wyndham and Columbia programs on the overall effectiveness of their juvenile justice diversion programs.
I'll second that.
It's seconded by Mr. Frattoni. And would you speak to your amendment, Mr. Osberger?
Well, yes, as I had said before, we have these other two districts that we're going to be bringing along. And, I think that's a wonderful idea, as part of Region 19. And most of these kids all know each other. And I know the good work that the Mansfield Youth Services has done through the years. But again, the examples given today, I don't know that they really reflect our area of the state. And with that, I would like to hear of the two towns that are close to us that probably do represent our state, our area of the state, and our town much closer. And I would hope to, as this motion is amended, would like to see a pending presentation by both the Wyndham and the Columbia programs.
Ms. Bell or Ms. Schneider, have you had any contact with either of these programs?
I have over the year, Katie can speak, we have had, she has had some direct contact with Columbia. I can say that the wonderful thing about juvenile review boards is you're actually able to shape it to reflect your own community. I think what you're referring to are the MOUs. Those are just examples of other regional MOUs. They're not necessarily what we may produce in the town. We would be able to be distinct. I think you're going to hear from those places the positive effects, you know, but what I can say is those MOUs aren't really, you know, they were just examples.
Right, Pat. And
we have a question. Would we, as a council, have to approve the final MOU, Mr. Aylesworth?
Yes, you would. All we're basically intending to do tonight, aside from reintroducing the concept, is to ensure that the council is fully supportive of pursuing this regional restorative justice model, and we'll move forward with, you know, drafting an agreement in appropriate consultation with all the right parties, and that would come before the council to be ratified, as it would have to be ratified by the other member towns as well, because this is a collaborative 3-town model we're talking about.
All right, so Mr. Osberger has made a motion to amend the, he's made a motion to table, which is not discussable. So all of those in favor of tabling this motion, please raise your hand. All right, the motion is has 2 supporters and everybody else is opposed, unless somebody wishes to abstain. All right, the motion fails. I'm sorry, Mr. Osberger, but I think the concern that you have will be addressed as the process of developing the MOU goes forward and before we get to see the final version. I certainly would not want to base an MOU in Mansfield on the problems that they're having in Darien and Westport. I'm not sure I would want to base it on, I think Mansfield should have its own, Mansfield and its neighboring towns, its cooperating towns need to have their own MOU based on the needs of these communities, particularly. Mr. Aylesworth.
Yeah, and I guess I apologize if by including those in any way it caused some confusion. I just want to clear that up by saying that we're not suggesting that the language in these agreements, that what we would ultimately produce would look at anything like that. We're basically just include those as examples to show that there are these other multi-town, you know, quote unquote regional restorative justice programs that exist, and that was really the only reason to include it as a supplement.
Yeah, and they're obviously very different from one another as well. So I'm hoping that what comes out of our negotiation is specific, meets the needs of these specific towns, their staff, and their population. All right, are we ready to vote on the unamended motion? Does anybody have anything else they wish to say on the motion to develop an MOU? All right, well, is there anybody who is going to abstain from this motion? Is there anybody who's negative? Then the motion is adopted unanimously. Thank you, one and all. And thank you very much to the staff for working on this and Ms. Berthelot for pursuing it. It's definitely a good thing for us to do. All right, the next item on the agenda is support for Afghan refugee resettlement. Mr. Aylesworth and where did he go? Mr. Matoma and there. So tell us about this.
in the interest of time, I'll keep this brief and turn things over to Glenn pretty quickly. But based on past conversations and council meetings, it's quite clear that the council as a body is very interested in the town of Mansfield as a local government entity, stepping up to the plate and doing as much as it can to assist with refugee resettlement, with a particular focus or interest in what's going on with Afghan refugees at the moment. And so in the last week and a half or so, I had the benefit of sitting in on a Zoom meeting with Glenn and a lot of others that are working in this space, including folks from a Quiet Corner Refugee Resettlement Group and IRIS. And I know I've had an opportunity to learn quite a bit. And I know it's also just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the background and information that goes into this. But Glenn's here to speak as a knowledge expert in that area, and also speak to some of the recommendations that have come out of deliberations by the Human Rights Commission in terms of what the town of Mansfield might be able to do to help on this front. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Glenn.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Madam Mayor and council members for inviting the Human Rights Commission to contribute to your deliberations on this important matter. Actually, Councilman Schueren reached out to us a couple of weeks ago and asked us to consider this as part of our agenda, and we've been doing some consultations. It's an area where we're obviously concerned and have key community partners with substantial knowledge and others at the University of Connecticut. And so we liaised with them over the past couple of weeks to provide the briefing memo that you've seen there, the draft resolution, as well as some additional resources for your consideration as you approach this. So I won't go over in detail the background, which I think many of you are familiar with simply by paying attention to the news. But what we do know, of course, is that there are a number of Afghan refugee, SIV, humanitarian parolee, and other newcomers who will be soon joining us now in Connecticut, and that communities all across the state are making efforts to receive and welcome them in different ways. And I'll say our approach in considering this issue, of course, was to go beyond the Afghan situation to consider what we as a town might do to become a more welcoming community for all kinds of newcomers. It wasn't lost on me that this issue kind of came across our transom at the same time I was reviewing the new results from the 2020 census about our town and the changing demographics here, and certainly that the rising numbers of Asian and Latinx residents here particularly caught my eye. We are already welcoming newcomers in many ways, and to do so intentionally and with a deliberate focus on ensuring that they find a community that values them, that treats them as part of the community and is essential to its functioning is something that I believe the council and certainly the commission wants to do. So the 8 recommendations that we outlined for you in this memo certainly will have a direct and immediate impact on our capacity to rise to the challenge of meeting our responsibilities to the Afghan people. But more fundamentally, they will go a long way to beginning the process of ensuring Mansfield is as welcoming as it can be. So I'll go briefly through these each one, and of course you're welcome to interrupt me at any time, as you know, and ask me any questions if you have one. So the first thing, of course, maybe it's unsurprising, is that the town should embark on a process to create a comprehensive plan to be a welcoming community for refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants, and other newcomers. And there's a lot we can do in the short term around the Afghan situation, but really fundamentally, to be a welcoming community takes careful planning and the investment of time and resources. And if that's what we'd like to be, then the town should take the effort to be deliberate about that. The second recommendation is to designate a lead staff member responsible for overseeing newcomer affairs. Many cities, of course, have an immigrant affairs bureau, and while we are probably not of the size and scope to create a whole new department, it's certainly within reason that an individual, perhaps already existing, could have added to their portfolio concerns with newcomers, and could be a primary point of contact contact for others within the community, as well as the interagency and regional collaborations that are necessary to advance this. I think that point of contact, that person who is the ambassador of sorts with these new communities, would go a long way, again, to signaling our commitment to welcoming newcomers. The third point is to support multi-sectoral partnerships that can coordinate the arrival, welcome, and integration of resettled Afghans and others. And then I list several existing potential stakeholders to bring to the table, but there are certainly others. So Ryan already mentioned the Quiet Corner Refugee Resettlement. Also, Wyndham Area Interfaith Ministries has been heavily involved. The Neighbor Fund, Mansfield Public Schools and Region 19 schools, University of Connecticut. Certainly being able to convene on a regular basis all of these partners will allow for a coordination of what are really often complex sets of issues that newly arriving families face. The fourth recommendation is to collaborate and coordinate with other towns in the region. And I'll just say I was delighted to hear the earlier conversation on the youth justice initiative. This is something that certainly the Mansfield Human Rights Commission values and believes is essential, but also because it encourages regional collaboration. And I think in this case in particular, this highlights a real opportunity to begin partnering in a much more deliberate way with our neighbor just to the south of us, Wyndham. Wyndham is already a community that welcomes a large number of new arrivals, particularly from Central and Latin America. They have experience, they have community leaders, they have community organizations and local knowledge that will be essential to ensuring that new arrivals in Mansfield are able to access a wide range of the community resources regionally. I think there's also some obligation to support regionally the impacts that recent arrivals can have on different town resources, and I think Mansfield can play a role in supporting Wyndham in that regard. So I would certainly encourage direct outreach, town-to-town outreach to begin that as well. The fourth is to support the fifth is to support the creation of a fund to help address gaps in supports and benefits from newcomers. Resettled refugees come with a fairly robust set of resources from the federal government. It may be that there's some evidence to suggest that occasionally those don't last long enough, but certainly in the short term, they are generally robust and sufficient to sustain a family as it begins its adjustment to its new home. We're not clear at all on whether SIVs or the humanitarian parolees also arriving are going to have access to those same resources. And then more broadly, other newcomers and immigrants with different statuses often have gaps in their ability to access the public services that are necessary to their economic and social well-being, and being able to bridge that gap in an efficient and timely manner is often critical to keeping them out of the spiral that can take years, if not decades, to recover from. So the town should support, and that's with private partnership and philanthropy, the establishment of such a fund that could be used to meet those needs as they arrive. The sixth would be to adopt a message of welcome in the form of a resolution. And encourage others within the community to do so, schools, businesses, and private residents as well. So we've provided a draft of a potential resolution that the council may adopt. It is very specific to Afghan refugees because that was what was requested of us. But the council may also decide it would like to make a broader statement of welcome, which I think is also important in signaling to both those new arrivals, but also to the older residents of the community that this is a value that the town is prepared to uphold and pursue. So that's included there. And then the seventh is to consider policy changes to promote a more welcoming environment. So this would certainly go hand in hand with the overall comprehensive welcoming plan. It would also, and this goes with the last point here, is to join a national organization such as Welcoming America. I think the town has an opportunity to learn from other communities who have gone through this, who have set themselves up as welcoming, from the larger network and movement to create these welcoming communities. So Welcoming America is a national organization, member-based organization. They have a particular set of programs for rural communities, one that you can apply to, and if you're successfully selected, you're provided a free membership. It's a $1,500 fee otherwise, so it's actually not that onerous should we decide to join either way. And you'll have access to coaching, to webinars, to other capacity building activities to support the kind of longer term strategy of building toward a welcoming community. And that would include the ability to review town policies. I'll say in particular, probably for us, one of the critical ones is related to language accessibility, and whether or not we're adequately providing for the range of mother tongue languages that are spoken in Mansfield, and ensuring that the residents here are able to access all the aspects of our community. So that review should be forthcoming as well. So okay, I'll stop here for questions.
Mr. Shuren.
No question. At the appropriate time, I'm going to offer a resolution. I will say, first of all, thank you very, very much for this detailed information from which I learned a lot, and I'm sure others did as well. Thanks to you and Pat and others who worked on this in the Human Rights Commission. I understand the reasoning of those who say the resolution should be broader. I accept the concept. I would like this resolution to relate to refugees from Afghanistan. I think that sharpens the focus, and it is something that is of great national immediate concern. Later, I think we can add and have an additional discussion and resolution for the general concept of dealing with refugees from other places as well. But for now, the resolution that I'll present will deal with specifically the Afghanistan issue.
Mr. Aylesworth, would you comment on this? There are a great many recommendations that involve town staff and town administrative responsibilities.
I think that the conversations I've had with staff are, all very much in recognition and support of the need that the council, is trying to help address, and understands that what we're talking about is very much consistent with the values of the community. And I think, while the proverbial devil's in a lot of details, I think we are optimistic that a lot of what we're trying to accomplish here, including what's being laid out in the recommendations that Glenn just relayed, will be able to be accomplished through existing staff capacity and bandwidth. It might, obviously, we have a lot on our collective plate, but I think we'll be able to do it with the staff capacity we already have.
Okay, Mr. Shuren, do you want to make your resolution?
Yes, thank you. Whereas I should say there are a few minor editorial changes from what appears in your packet. Whereas after the collapse of the Afghanistan government and the Taliban takeover of Kabul, Afghanistan's capital city, many Afghan citizens are leaving or have left the country and seeking asylum. And whereas thousands of Afghan citizens supported American and allied forces, standing side by side with our service members, diplomats, and aid workers while serving as interpreters, engineers, logistical service providers, and more. And whereas thousands of Afghan refugees who need to be evacuated and resettled include women leaders, journalists, civil society activists, LGBTI individuals, and former government employees, all of whom are at risk. And whereas this comes at a time when there are already more refugees in the world today than at any time since World War II, and more than half of the world's refugees are children. And whereas refugees and asylum seekers are fleeing armed conflict and human rights abuses in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and other regions. And whereas the United States has a historic bipartisan tradition of welcoming refugees in keeping with our national values and respect for human rights. And whereas Mansfield has historically welcomed refugees escaping war and political violence, and whereas Mansfield has committed, by policy adopted February 14, 2017, to the principle that diversity is the root of our strength and vibrancy, and that the town will ensure the safety, security, and sense of belonging of all Mansfield residents, regardless of immigration status. And whereas the Quiet Corner Refugee Resettlement, affiliated with Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, the organizations responsible for resettling refugees in this community, and well as numerous other community organizations and religious institutions, have declared their support for resettling refugees in Mansfield and surrounding communities. Whereas Mansfield refugees are currently arriving in Connecticut, welcomed by Governor Ned Lamont, who has pledged to the resettlement of as many as 310 Afghans in the coming months. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the town of Mansfield declares its support for the resettlement of Afghan refugees and hereby notifies the United States federal government that Mansfield stands ready to welcome Afghan refugees.
Is there a second for this motion? Mr. Shaken seconds. Mr. Shuren, would you like to speak to your motion?
This is a national cause. It is one that all people of goodwill who have an understanding of our national commitments support and should support. Mansfield should be proud to be part of that. This is part of our tradition as a community and something that I think we urgently need to subscribe to.
Are there any other comments on this resolution? You're ready to vote. Is there anybody who wishes to abstain from this resolution? Is there anybody who wishes to oppose this resolution? Then the resolution has been adopted unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Matoma, and for the commission for your good work on this.
You're welcome.
And just one more note, I just want to reiterate how much, we look forward to working with the various partners in our community. I think we have a tremendous advantage that we have so many organizations and of course the University of Connecticut that's very active in this area. And so as we move forward, as I referenced that internal capacity that we're going to be trying to leverage, we're certainly going to be doing this as a village.
And Mr. Answorth, can I request that we get a report at future meetings as on the progress that we're making and what's been happening in these efforts?
Happy to do so, Madam Mayor.
As we go forward?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, the next items on our agenda are a series of financial issues that came through the Finance Committee this evening. Mr. Katzenberger, you have, how would you like to proceed as chair of the Finance Committee?
I think for questions, I think it's best, we don't necessarily need to summarize the points, but I think it's best to move through each one of them separately, at least the first three. But we can do so, I think, fairly quickly.
Well, why don't you put each one on one at a time on the floor by moving it from the Finance Committee?
Yeah, that's discussion? Right, that's what I meant to do. The Finance Committee, and just so we know, the Finance Committee did vote earlier tonight before the Town Council meeting in support of each of these all four motions. The first is the quarterlies, the financial statements, and these begin in the packet on page 85, but the motion is 83. And I move effective September 27th, 2021 to accept the financial statements dated June 30th, 2021. And I don't think we need a second.
Don't need a second. Do you want to speak to this motion? Just
briefly, and then I'll put if Charmaine has other points. Generally, it's the news is in this area is pretty good. Our tax collection is up to pre-pandemic level. We have achieved through the hard work of the town employees, Ryan, Charmaine, and other directors, the substantial savings in numerous accounts, some of it related to COVID expenses and reimbursement for them, some of it simply belt tightening. The recreation center, Parks and Recreation will require, as we know, a subsidy or a transfer, and that will be, it's sizable, but it's also a couple $100,000 less than we anticipated like roughly a year ago. One thing as well, we also have received the first year's payment of our ARPA, federal government ARPA payment of $3,771,446. So this money is in the account. It has, of course, not been appropriated, but we have received the first payment of that. We can talk about Parks and Rec, that fund if you'd like to, but Charmaine, is there anything you wanted to add?
No.
Are there any questions regarding the financial statements? Mr. Frattoni.
Thank you. I just have one question, really. It has to do with Parks and Rec. The balance sheet as of June 30th. I'm looking at deferred revenue. There was none in 2020, and it's like 98,000 in 2021. I'm just trying to understand why that is. That's my only question.
I would have to pull up the revenue summary report to give you the specifics on that.
Okay.
Is that something that I can provide to you in writing?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Bruder.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the community center stop charging its members for COVID and then started it up again? I think in. Oh no, that wouldn't explain that. Never mind.
Much of the problem with it is the combination of pre-COVID issues, like silver sneakers, and then of course COVID.
And of course, if the community center was closed for a period, you wouldn't have gotten even silver sneakers payments.
Or any, right. One point and I don't want to rush this, but I know it's getting later. But one point I forgot to mention, we have $5 million in the health insurance fund, which is well over the minimum we need, and that minimum includes some buffer. However, 900,000 of that has not yet been deducted, but we've approved it some meetings ago, I believe, to reduce employee health. But the increase in employee health premiums. So while it is still very robust, it is also it won't be ultimately at 5 million.
Correct. The $900,000 that was included in the budget process for all of the respective agencies that contribute to the medical insurance fund has not been taken out. So you're looking at June 30th, 2021. That is for budget year fiscal year 21-22, the $900,000 reduction to support the employer and employee shares of premium costs.
Are there any other questions? All right, are we ready to vote on the financial statements? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain from the vote on the financial statements? Anybody who wishes to vote in the negative on the financial statements? Financial statements have been approved unanimously. Mr. Katzenberger, would you like to proceed to the proposed year-end transfers?
Yes, this is and the motion I'm going to read is roughly the same. I move to appropriate $20,000 zoning permit revenue, $55,000 of housing code permit revenue, and $55,000 of P&Z consulting fee revenue to the transfer out to Parks and Recreation for a total of $125,000. And then further move to approve the proposed year-end transfers described above and as detailed in the chart prepared as of today.
Would you care to discuss, Mr. Katzenberger?
Yes, so what, in essence, we mentioned some of the savings that, well, a lot of the savings that the various departments did. Depending on the amount of savings that's going to be transferred, we have certain limitations in terms of the amount as a percentage, 0.5% or 0.5%. So this we need to specifically recognize some of these transfer outs. None of this, of course, is increased. Increased revenue. I'm sorry, increased expenditures. This is simply reflecting several of the specific transfers out of some funds into Parks and Recreation. There's other funds as well. And Charmaine, I don't know if I explained that well, but if you want to elaborate, please do.
These are, again, because these are non-tax revenue, meaning they are from fees, permit fees and consulting fees, then the council can make the decision to reappropriate that or appropriate, those extra funds elsewhere, as long as we are within the 0.5% of the annual budget.
Are there any questions regarding year-end transfers? Mr. Osberger, you're muted.
Peter, did I read somewhere in there that some of this transfer is going for Silver Sneakers?
No. Silver Sneakers program has been a revenue issue for the community center for a while, years rather. So I was referring to that simply as one of the reasons why there has been a deficit for the community center Parks and Recreation Fund and the various efforts they've taken and we're taking now, for example, to shore that up. But no, the Silver Sneakers is an issue that we and other towns have to deal with.
I mean, I know we've discussed this before, but isn't Silver Sneakers fully funded by Medicaid?
Yes, but the funds that we get from Silver Sneakers do not fully fund the community center.
Many members have made a rational economic decision and moved out of paying the family fee or the annual membership fee into the Silver Sneakers option, which is frankly much cheaper for them. The unfortunate thing is that, of course, the expenses of the community center don't go down regardless of whether someone comes in through Silver Sneakers or the regular membership.
And the other piece. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I was just going to say the other piece of that is the revenue from Silver Sneakers is actually based on actual usage. So, if somebody were a member and not really using the facility, we would get the same revenue. But with a Silver Sneakers membership, if they are a member with Silver Sneakers, but then don't really go to the facility, then the amounts that are paid reflect that lack of usage. And so revenues then tend to go down.
Yeah, and I would say that, going forward, once Wyndham finishes building their community center, aren't we going to have to fund this even more?
We're certainly aware of the potential, just as the community center has felt the presence of UConn's new fitness facility, community center there, that the potential for competition and competition over the same quote unquote customer base could exist. We're also exploring options and certainly not saying that this is the direction we're headed, but the possibility of like when you think about other leisure activities that are out there, like ski areas that have bundled together and you have a pass that gets you into multiple facilities, there might be a partnership that could be worked out with some of these other organizations so that it's not just straight competition. Perhaps there's a membership level that somebody can come in where they pay a bit more and they're members of all three. So those are all things that we need to explore, but certainly it is a concern, what the impact will be on our membership base moving forward.
Brian, I think that's a great idea. Perhaps that's something we need to look into, and maybe you could put some feelers out and get back to us.
Yeah, the finance, at the next finance committee meeting, which will be before the hour before the next town council meeting, we've invited Parks and Rec to come in and start talking, very specifically about some of the proposals they have. So that's certainly something then we can discuss there as well.
I mean, because I get worried that how much more are we going to have to prop up the program when it should be self-funding to a degree,
It's a problem that we have been facing for a couple of years now, and it hasn't gone away, and it's an ongoing issue.
All right, thank you.
I'm fairly certain that the town manager and the head of Parks and Rec are very much aware of the difficulty.
I'm sure he is too.
I think we just need to vote on the motion.
Anybody opposed to the year-end transfers? They've been adopted unanimously. Proposed capital CIP program adjustments.
Yes, so this is this begins on page 82.
No. This begins on 153.
Oh, I'm looking at the finance committee agenda. Yes, that's right. I'll make the motion, which is under, you said 153. I move effective September 27th, 2021 to approve the adjustments to the capital projects fund as presented by the Director of Finance in her correspondence dated September 22nd, 2021. And that memo is below.
Mr. Aylesworth?
Just want to point out that after going to print, we realized that both this and actually the next agenda item summary that the council will review, there's a small amount of verbiage that needs to be inserted in this motion, and that is a reference to the fiscal year that we're talking about. So just to reread this one, it would be move effective September 27th, 2021 to approve the adjustments to the capital projects fund for FY 2020/21 as presented by the Director of Finance, etc.
And I'll certainly agree to that.
Would you care to speak to this motion, Mr. Katzenberger?
This one is fairly, and I appreciate the amendment, by the way. This is what sort of the financial housekeeping we do every year, both, and this is for the previous year. Then we'll, and I don't know if Charmaine wants to discuss any of this. We went over the details in finance.
So again, these are the 15 items that are listed in the memo are directly related to us trying to reconcile the capital improvements program budget, if you will. And for example, the first one is $2,700. I mean, the numbers go from I think $25 up to $207,000. So the $2,700 for town walkways and transportation enhancement, that's permit fees that we don't budget for. So we get the money in, and then we have to appropriate it so that it can be used to do the sidewalks and transportation enhancement. So that's one of the smaller ones. Again, the larger dollar amounts, appropriation of $207,000 deep grant to the open space account for the purchase of Simpson property. The purchase was $346,000, so we needed to appropriate the $207,000 from the grant to cover the full cost.
Are there any questions regarding the capital improvement program adjustments for 2021. Nope. Anybody have any objection to this motion? Then I'll rule it's been adopted unanimously. Proposed capital improvement program adjustments for 21-22. This is the following year. Mr. Aylesworth, do you want to propose correct wording?
Well,
I have put the correct suggested corrected motion in the chat for everyone to see, but I did want to just briefly speak to this one so people understand what's being proposed here. So the capital improvement program for FY 21-22, as hopefully everybody will recall, included $55,000 for what I'm calling a municipal facilities optimization study. Basically, it's a needs assessment and programmatic use study of a majority of our buildings. That $55,000 budget was generated in consultation with our facilities department, and with feedback from other communities that embarked on similar studies. We put this project out to bid. We got proposals. We identified a preferred firm, and that's TSKP Studios. And then that firm gave us a fee proposal. The $55,000 budget is exactly the correct amount to do the core amount of the project. So there's a $55,000 piece of this project, which is basically the core aspects of what we wanted to accomplish. So we've appropriated already the exact right amount of money to get that done. However, in further consultation with TSKP Studios, we talked about the scope of the project. And there were a couple of things that we talked about. As we talked about them more, we realized we probably should really give serious consideration to including those in the scope of work. And the biggest piece of that was a set of real estate analysis services that would be provided by a firm called Gorman and York. So when it comes to land the town might be interested in acquiring for a facility, or land the town might be interested in selling, their services would be separate and outside of the original scope of work. So therefore they would come at an additional fee. And the proposed ceiling for those services is $20,000. And then the last piece of the budget would be the inclusion of contingencies in the amount of $15,000 should we realize as we get further into the project, and this is a very organic process, that we want them to look at additional properties that weren't on their radar, or do new, higher, and better things in terms of their analysis of our existing buildings. So that contingencies budget, of course, would only be invoked if we actually agreed to a change of scope of work, which right now we don't envision, but it's money set aside in case that eventuality happens. So that's why it's being proposed that three additional transfers in the aggregate amount of $35,000 be approved by the town council, and where those funds would be coming from are laid out in your packet materials.
Thank you, Mr. Aylesworth. Mr. Katzenberger, would you read the motion, please?
Yes, I'm going to make one just change at the end, just so we know it now. Dated, I think the director's memo or correspondence was dated September 22nd, 2021. But I move effective September 27th, 2021 to approve the adjustments to the capital projects fund for fiscal year 2021, 2022, as presented by the Director of Finance in the correspondence dated September 22nd, 2021.
Is there anything you wish to add to Mr. Aylesworth's explanation?
No, that's, he gave a very thorough explanation.
Are there any questions? Is there anybody who wishes to vote in opposition to this motion? I rule that the motion's been adopted unanimously. Thank you. On to council committees. Mr. Katzenberger, while we've got you, anything else from finance?
This was the bulk of virtually all our work was working on these four issues for the four motions. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, at the next finance committee meeting, we will we'll meet with probably the first of several meetings with people from Parks and Recreation, as well as Ryan and Charmaine, to talk about their specific strategies to reduce the budget the deficit going forward, including, of course, addressing silver sneakers.
Okay. Ms. Berthelot, Personnel?
Thank you, Mayor. We met earlier this evening. The first thing we spoke about was the draft of the remote work policy. I mentioned this last time we met. This is Holly Schaefer has been working on this. It's really important. It's progressing. We met tonight with Jamie Russell to talk about the technology components. There was some concern of how things would be kept confidential. He gave us excellent responses. There are a few other things that we're working on, but I hope to get this in front of the council fairly soon. The other thing we spoke about was raising the compensation for the Board of Assessment Appeals. We voted to do that. It's not on tonight's agenda, so expect it will be on our agenda next time we meet. The other thing we talked about was employee vaccination.
Are you talking about authorizing payment or raising payment?
Raising.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing we spoke about was mandating the town employees to get vaccinated to be consistent with the soon to be issued OSHA requirements. One of the things that's in progress, as I understand it, Mr. Ellsworth, is the survey of the employees. Is that launched or will that be launched very soon?
That will be launched very soon.
Do you have a sense, like in a week or?
Probably within this week, perhaps.
Terrific. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bruder, first Committee on Committees and then Ad Hoc Housing.
Committee on Committees has not met since our last meeting. We did have a number of appointments that was on the consent agenda, so I appreciate the support everybody gave for that. And for the Ad Hoc Committee on Affordable Housing, we have not met since the last one, but just a reminder, we'll be discussing making a permanent committee and setting up a housing trust ordinance recommendation.
Thank you. I think that covers our committees. Anything on departmental or advisory committee reports? Anything on petitions, requests, and communications? I will point out that on Monday, October 4th, Planning and Zoning is having a hearing on the scenic road alteration recommendation. Ultimately, this is a town council decision, so you may want to pay some attention to that. I guess we get a recommendation from Planning and Zoning. I'm not quite sure how this works. But in any case, at some point, we will be asked to make a decision. Another comment, the Region 19 Board of Education has invited finance chairs from the regions to attend a Board of Ed meeting where they will be discussing negotiations for the coming year. Normally the finance chair and sometimes the mayor attend. We will make sure that Mansfield is represented one way or the other. And that's all my comments on communications. Does anybody else have anything? Anybody have anything for future agendas? I think we want some follow-up on the refugee proposal too, as we go forward. Other than that, a motion to adjourn is in order. Is there a motion to adjourn? Sam and
Second.
Ron, by Mr. Bruder and seconded by Mr. Shuren. All right, good night. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.